see going on. A couple things we're doing that I just want to pull your coat to before we hear from some others with their reports. We are now putting ads in the Betsy Current. They're little teeny ones like this, and also in the Benzie Record Patriot, about the same size, maybe a little bigger, but basically they state a value like, do you believe the elections were fair? So do Democrats. Join us, and then BenzieDemocrats.com, which is our website. And again, I'll say, if you haven't visited our website, Greta Bolger's doing a really nice job on it, and it's got a lot of resources. And if you ever want somebody to sign up for one of our meetings, all you got to do is send them to the website, and they can do it there. It's BenzieDemocrats.com. They can also sign up for the newsletter, and they can also see all of our events that are coming up, and lots of other good information. So that's a good thing to share with friends, and I hope you will. BenzieDemocrats.com. Also, starting very soon, and we'll hear a little bit more about this during the meeting, although we're not quite ready to push it out big time, but we're pulling together a group of people to start recruiting candidates for the county commission elections, which are coming up. And when you look at how slowly the county commission works on stuff, and look at the fact that it's 7 Republicans and no Democrats, we would really, really like to get some people on that board this time around. And so we're going to start working on that soon. And I wanted you to know that we are thinking about that, and we are working on it. So with that, I'd like to hand this off to Kira Duvernoy, our wonderful membership chairman, and all around great vice chair, to talk to us about where our membership is at. Kira?
Hi. Oh, wait a minute, I have to make her.
No,
I'm
not yet.
You're not. Okay.
Not yet.
So membership is going well. We have not been able to go out and do any tabling events. We were hoping to go to the farmers markets. The one in Frankfurt had decided not to allow any political tabling because they had lots of requests from QAnon type people, so they nixed us. So we can't get out there very easily and do any events. So I'm asking that if you know anybody who might be interested, encourage them to join. We definitely need some people who are younger than 60, maybe even 70. That would be great. We need to groom up and coming people into our party, which you can encourage any friends or acquaintances that we're kind of fun, I think, anyway. Then we're also hoping to encourage people to renew. So many people who intend to continue being members just sort of forget, even with reminders, that they need to renew. So if anybody on this Zoom call wonders if they are due to renew and have forgotten that they got a reminder, they can put their name in the chat, and I'll get back to you to tell you whether or not it's time for you to renew. With that, that's our membership report.
Thank you, Kira. How many members do we have now?
376.
And how many members did we have 18 months ago?
Oh gosh.
This is a pop quiz here.
I don't know. I gotta get back to you on that.
I would guess about 175. So we've been doing really, really well. A lot of our outreach and a lot of our activities, things like the billboards, things like being on Main Street here. And please tell your friends to join. As you can tell, we like to have a good time, and the meetings are fun and interesting, and we certainly need you given what's going on. So thanks, Kira. Mary Roebling, are you in the house?
I am in the house.
Hi, Mary, how you doing?
I'm okay. How about you?
Oh, fine. Welcome. You are on the agenda to talk to us briefly about township lookouts. What's going on?
We're moving along. I desperately need people for Lake Township and for Lake Ann. And in both cases, I do have people who are signed up who are committed, but they don't seem to be able to get to the meetings. So those are two really important townships. Elmira is super important to us. So if you think you can go to a meeting a month, please give me a call and I will get you plugged in with Deanne. And you will have the privilege of being a lookout reporter for us and send a little news blip out to your townships about what's going on government-wise in the township. So that's all.
Mary? This is
Yes.
Kathleen Hibbert here.
Hey.
I'll turn my video back on. I am supposed to be the lookout for Benzonia Township,
Uh-huh.
and they have been reluctant. You know, COVID got better, so they were reluctant to continue with the video, with the Zoom meetings,
Uh-huh.
to make that available. And for the July meeting, I asked that they do it, and I attended that meeting, and the audio was so terrible I could only hear half of what was being said.
Okay.
I have to say, I totally understand that as producing this for the first time, it can get pretty complicated pretty quickly.
Well, the audio in this meeting is excellent.
Oh,
So I don't know what Benzonia Township's problem is, but with COVID getting worse, you know, Jason Bernard told me that, you know, they were making Zoom available and then nobody was Zooming in and attending. And
yeah.
there was one meeting that I missed, unfortunately, and no one else Zoomed in either. So then they quit doing Zoom and I had to beg them to do it for that.
Well, we'll look into that offline, Kat, and see
I'm
what we
gonna
can
have
do.
to, I'll go
help with
over to the township and talk to him, you know, and
Yeah.
tell him, you know, COVID's getting worse again and.
Yeah,
Right.
okay. The thing I would like to emphasize to folks, if you'd like to be part of this, we can find a couple people for your township.
Right.
You only have to go every other month. And you don't have to worry about whether you're a good writer or not. All you need to do is take some decent notes and type them up so that they're readable. And Deanne Lau, who couldn't be here today because of a wedding, is our editor for this project. And she turns them into a very, very nicely formatted thing. Really makes you look good. It really does. That's what I think she's doing. And they go out just to the folks in your township. And I have to say that the response has been just fantastic. I was looking at some what are called open rates for emails that go out, to bulk email that go out, and different categories get 12%, 15%, 20%, 25%. Our emails that go out get like 37, 40%, which is really good. The ones that go out for the townships, they're mostly over 50%. A lot of people are paying attention to this, so this is important work. So those two townships are Lake and what else? Elmira?
Elmira.
Yeah, townships. We really need some help there. And if you're at all interested, please contact Mary Roebling about this and see if we can get this going better.
Jim, this is Marcia Curran.
Hi, Marcia.
I'd be glad to try to do Lake, but I don't know when they meet. So,
Okay.
Yeah,
Marcia, it's on their website,
okay.
but I will double check that and send you the
Okay.
times.
Okay,
There,
good.
there may be an issue with the Zoom capability at Lake also.
Yeah, I'm sure.
So,
Marcia,
Yes.
Marcia, this is Jane.
Hi, Jane.
And I think it's very early in every month, like the first Thursday or the first Monday or Tuesday or something. So look on the website. I tried Zoom once and I couldn't get the sound. and they told me a little about it. And of course, they put minutes on the website, on their website, but their minutes are pretty late. I mean, couple of months late, so they aren't often useful either. And I cannot go anymore. I'm not going to go to in-person meetings anymore. So, and I'm probably going away soon. So sorry. And I don't know what happened to Marta. Maybe she'll do it some too.
No, I think the thing with Marta is also related to the Zoom issue.
Yes, yes.
So we need to talk to Dottie. I know what we need to do, and I will work on that, and I'll get back to both of you.
Okay,
And
good.
they
Thank
got
you.
the Zoom to work once.
Yeah.
That's hopeful.
Yeah.
Hi.
Okay.
Okay, well, thanks. And again, we're still looking for Elmira too, some help there. And thanks to everybody else who's doing this, because it's really working out. It really is. And,
It is.
we're quite thrilled about it. So keep thrilling us, okay? Would you do that, please? Okay, next up, Jane, would you be able to talk to us about the LTE project? I know you've managed it the last few weeks. Could you tell folks just generally how it's going?
Sure. Hi, everybody. It's going great. Each week, the Michigan Party sends out some bullet points of what's going on, the messaging, and then representatives of the 101st District gather through Zoom and choose one of those messages, and we all shoot out to volunteer letter writers so that we're having a unified, repetitive message on the same topic. And it's going great, and we could always use more people if anyone's interested in writing letters or participating. If so, just write it in the chat.
Yes, and just to be clear, the way this works is that Rick Rhodes, who I don't believe is in the house today, Rick and Judy have scheduled the people that have volunteered to write these letters. So you know well ahead of time that you're going to have a deadline on September 15th, and you'll hear from us on September 10th about what the letter needs to be about. And so you can schedule yourself every 5 or 6 weeks or whatever, and break it up that way. So again, we're trying to make it not burdensome, but something we depend on you to do. So think about doing that, and we'll check out the letter page on the Record Patriot. It's pretty darn good. A lot of the time we're kind of dominating the page from time to time, which is great.
Excellent letters. Been terrific.
Yeah. Okay, Steve, would you talk a little bit about the memes? We've been sending these themes for the letter writing to our meme maker, Greta Bolger, who's here today. Greta, would you say hello, please? If you're here.
Greta is here, and
Yes, I'm here, and hello.
Hi, Greta.
Hi,
I just
Greta.
want to thank you for the great work you're doing on these memes. It was a real wrestling match to get that new design platform that we purchased to work right, but you figured it out. You hung in there and you figured it out, and now we've got these very nice memes going around on Facebook, and one of the people we send them to is Steve Thompson, who's one of our Facebook folks. Steve, could you tell us how all that's going and what kind of reaction you're seeing?
Absolutely. When I get the image on my email, I'm able, with this computer, I'm able to copy the image, and then I go over to my Facebook side and I post immediately to the Benzie County Democrat discussion group, and I also put the image on my wall. Sometimes I comment on it, sometimes I don't. I just put the image. This latest set of memes we had, I did put a couple of them on my wall, but it seemed like Aubrey Parker and Greta and were right on the ball with the Benzie County discussion group, and I didn't see the need to repeat. But it works out really good. the only problem I've run into is, well, my son set security settings for me on this computer, so that it wouldn't get ransomed or what. But things like JPEG and for some reason I just cannot get into those. But the only thing that I seem to be able to get into is PDF. But then when I get into the PDF, it won't let me copy the image and then paste it to my Facebook. So when I get them, right on my email, I'm able to copy the image. The problem I run into is when somebody answers that email, then all of a sudden the images seem to disappear, and all I've got is everybody commenting on the emails. But whenever Greta puts a meme out to me, or you put a meme out to me, I make sure it gets to the Facebook.
Yep, and they seem to be spreading pretty good. Aubrey had some numbers. She's not here today, but she had some numbers about it that showed that a lot of them are really getting around, particularly the more positive ones, which is I think very interesting. Okay, well, we're going to go back to
speaking about positive, I do get all positive comments. I can't remember the last time I got a negative comment on any of the memes that I put onto Facebook.
Yeah.
Well, just one thing, Steve, if you have a different file type that works better for you, Canva allows me to save in 3 or 4 different ways. So if you can figure out what file type you need, just let me know.
PDF. That's the only thing that works on this computer is PDF.
All right, I got it.
Okay, great. This is what I like. I love how we're all working together on these projects. We're pulling in a lot of people who are good at this thing or good at that thing or good at another thing. I asked Jana to be our operator for our Zoom here, and I was kind of treating her with kid gloves because I didn't know how familiar she was with Zoom and setups and all that stuff, and find out today that, oh, she's done all this stuff already, and Jim, quit mansplaining, sit down. Right?
I'm not gonna argue.
Okay, she's not gonna argue. Okay, great. Well, now it's time to go back to Mary Roebling, who's gonna tell us about the Three Witches Halloween fundraiser.
Yes, we are scheduled to have a fundraiser for our beautiful Three Witches on October 23rd at the Mills at 6 o'clock with hearty hors d'oeuvres. And it will also be, in addition to being a fundraiser, it will also be our honoree dinner. And we will be honoring Bruce Ogilvie and John Jabazi and our fearless leader, Jim Dalzo. Yay! Okay, so, and they're all embarrassed, but they're all going to let themselves be honored. So, anyway, we have sort of a little tentative committee. And if you are in, I'm going to be calling you all this weekend so we can schedule a date to meet after Labor Day. And we've got to get going. We need to develop a plan A and a plan B. Plan A is in case we have the great privilege of getting to meet together, which is looking more remote, to be frank. Plan B is Zooming it. And if we Zoom, we will get to join with probably Lake Leelanau, the Leelanau Dam. So there are pluses on both sides. There are fun things for this committee to do on both sides. And so again, if you're interested in helping with that, please do give me a call over the weekend and we'll put you on the committee because you guys have the best ideas. And when we work together, we come up with something really brilliant.
That's really true, Mary. That's really true. Is your phone number or your email address up on the chat?
It is not. So I will put it there right now.
Please put it there. And I'll just remind everybody right at the end of the meeting, all you got to go do is go down to the chat box and there's this little 3 dots, click on them and there's a drop down and you can click on Save Chat and it shows up in your downloads, all right there, the whole chat. But do it right at the end of the meeting because it only does it from when you're there to when you save. So you need to do it right at the end of the meeting. Okay? And you'll have all this great information that's slowly compiling in our chat room there. And I'll just say that we've talked to Gretchen's people, and we've talked to Dana's people, and we've talked to Jocelyn's people, and Dana and Gretchen were all about it. They love the witches idea. They're very excited about it. We think Jocelyn is too, but it's going through a different chain of command and we haven't heard back yet. But we're going to have a lot of fun with this. That's the important part. So that's October 23rd. Please put it on your date book, boys and girls. We really want everybody to participate.
Costume.
Oh yeah, we're of course we're going to we're going to have costumes. It'll either be a costume party or a witches hat party and warlock hat party too, mind you. If depending on whether we're in person or online. But that's all still to be determined. I don't want to. So anyway, so that's that. Any questions on the Three Witches benefit? Okay, great. So now, Jana, would you share with Kira? Here's another one of our one moment, please.
Okay. Share screen. Okay, I am here to talk about the fact that there are committees in Benzie County that need people on these committees, and you will see them on your screen. So the committees that have openings are listed there. There's quite a few, 6 for the Planning Commission, that's good. And 5 for the Construction Board of Appeals, 1 for the very fun Parks and Recreation Committee, which is pretty much made up of Democrats. But anyway, we would like to get as many of our people on these committees as possible. They are, you can see here the committee application, which is a very basic, who are you and why do you think you want to be on this committee? In order to see what these committees are doing and how often you have to meet, you scroll up to, so we are at the benziecounty.net site, and you go to departments and committees all the way down to committees, click there, and you'll see a list of the different committees over to the side here. That's kind of dark, but when it's on your screen, it'll be fine. And you can click on any committee you might be interested in and find out what the requirements are. These are, of course, not paid positions, but they're very important for us to be able to have some say in what's going on in our community, and all politics is local. So go to, please, if you're at all interested, go to the Benzie County website, benzieco.net, and look at departments and committees, but before that, you want to know which ones are available, and that is under job openings, like you might get paid for it, but you won't. And then you might see that there's also a paid position, full-time deputy clerk at the county clerk's office available. So maybe you want to actually get a real job there. Wouldn't that be great?
Kira, Greta asked if you have to be a registered voter in Benzie County to apply for any of these. I expect that that question could be answered from county.
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that. I'm sure you have to be a Benzie County resident, but a registered voter, I don't know.
Yeah, I doubt it.
I doubt it too.
But it's a good question to ask.
Yeah. And when you do ask a question of the Benzie County people there at our county building, they're very good at getting back to you right away by email. So there you go. Anyway, that's my pitch. Please think about being on one of these fun committees. Some of them only meet every quarter, so it's not like it's going to take up your life. Thank you.
Thank you, Kira, for that excellent presentation. It's a great opportunity to learn more about the county and what's going on around here, and that's all a good thing. So that's great. Hey, have we seen Mark Brewer come in yet?
I have not,
Is Mark Brewer here yet?
unless he came in under another name.
No, I wouldn't do that.
We have 1 minute. I mean, he's probably gonna come in 1 minute. I
Yeah.
can't believe we're ahead of time.
Okay. Yeah, we're running ahead of schedule, folks. How about that?
So hi, everybody who we haven't got to say hello to before.
Yeah.
Hi, Brian Hull, Margot Wincoop. Look at this. Nancy Vanderlinde.
Jan, you want to go to the next page there, that blue arrow?
Yeah, I was trying to make her a co-host anymore, but I think that's right. Yeah, we have about 35 participants online, which is good.
It's great. Hi, everybody.
Hi, you all. Sorry we didn't get a chance to say hello during Coffee Clutch, but you're here now, so hi. Great.
2 people have entered the Mark Brewer is one of them.
Oh, great.
No, well, how come it's not showing up on?
Did you take the
I'm gonna
co-host
admit
tab?
them because I'm a co-host still, and
Okay, but I'm thinking, let me take this. Yeah. Hello.
Maybe you have to give it back to her.
Let's see.
Oh, let's see, find us right there. Here.
Hey, Jim, Mark Brewer has arrived.
Yes, I see that. Thanks.
Okay. Hi, Mark.
Mark Brewer's in the house.
Make host.
not me.
Morning.
Okay, right. So that is us.
Good morning, Mark.
That's
There's
us,
Mark,
that's
okay.
not me.
That'll work, right.
Awesome.
Okay.
Got it.
Okay, we're the host now, great.
Great. Okay.
Get out of here.
Okay, so Mark is here. I'd like to introduce him to everybody before he goes. Mark Brewer was the Michigan Democratic Party's longest serving chair, and he's well known in national policy and political circles for his wide-ranging expertise on a lot of legal things and a lot of grassroots and political organizing things too. Mark is, among other things, a highly experienced election rights attorney. And he's also a very good friend of the Benzie Democrats. He shows up for us whenever we need a question answered or we need a presentation, we need an expert on something. Mark is there. He's actually been to headquarters a couple different times, and we consider him a very special friend, and we're really glad to have him. We've got him in the house today to talk about what's going on in Lansing and nationally as Republicans mount this fierce attack on voter access and voter rights, as well as certification processes, which could actually steal our election results in broad daylight. So we're happy to have Mark with us today. I'd like to ask everybody to please mute if you have not already. Everybody except Mark, of course. And he's going to update us for a few minutes and then take a few of your questions via chat, please. So if you've got a question for Mark, please type it into the chat. So please, everybody, a warm welcome for Mark Brewer.
Thanks, Jim, and thanks for that kind introduction. It's great to see everybody. Thank you for the invitation. And I want to start by thanking you all for everything that you're doing, not only in last year's election, but what you're doing now and what you're going to do next year. This threat to the integrity of our elections is not gone away just because we won last year. There are persistent efforts nationally and in Michigan to continue to steal elections, and we're going to talk about that a little bit today. As Jim indicated, what's going on here in Michigan, which I'll give you in more detail in a moment, is part of a national effort by the Republicans to, continue the big lie, basically, that we saw perpetuated after last year's election, that they are continuing to claim that last year's election, the presidential election, was fraudulent, and therefore that there needs to be a lot of changes to the election laws to prevent that from happening in the future from their perspective. If you look at the bills that are being proposed around the country, they're very similar. There is national money, big national money being spent on this coordinated effort around the country, and Michigan is very much a part of this. the package of bills that's been pending in the legislature now for several months would make very extensive changes. I'm just going to spend a couple minutes highlighting them in a minute. But I think the most important thing you need to know about them is that they would represent the biggest rollback of voting rights in Michigan history. I just want to let that sink that in. The biggest rollback of voting rights in Michigan history is what is proposed in this package of bills. And here's what's going to happen. Whatever bills pass, the governor's going to veto. There's no doubt about that. But then in Michigan, almost unique in the country, as we have seen with other groups, you can run a petition drive. And if you get enough signatures, the legislature can enact the law without it going to the ballot and without the governor being able to veto it. We have seen groups, anti-labor groups, Right to Life, recently Unlock Michigan, all use this mechanism to bypass gubernatorial veto and enact very undemocratic and unprogressive, anti-progressive laws. And the Republicans have already announced that that's what they intend to do. And we're just waiting for that petition drive to begin. Before I talk about the petition drive and decline to sign, let me give you a sense of what's in these bills and just how bad they are. Michigan does not currently require photo identification in order to vote. You all know that when you're show up at the polls, you're asked for photo ID, but if you don't have it, you can sign that little affidavit on the back of the application to vote, and then you are permitted to vote. These bills would say, get rid of the affidavit. Unless you can show a photo identification when you show up to vote at the polls, you're not going to be able to vote a regular ballot. You'll get what's called a provisional ballot, which you will then have to, after the election, go to the clerk's office and verify your identity in order for that ballot to be counted. And we know that with most voters, that will not happen. So there are going to be thousands and thousands of voters who are going to be disenfranchised. Even worse than that, the photo ID requirement has never been required of absentee voters. And absentee voting is now increasingly popular, not just because of the pandemic, but because we made it a lot easier under 218 Proposal 3, where now anybody can vote absentee without having to give a reason. These bills say, if you want to vote absentee, you have to provide a copy of your photo ID with all of the complications that means. How many of you have copiers at home, right? The quality of the copy, et cetera, et cetera. It's going to have to be attached to your application. It's going to have to be reviewed by the clerk. This is going to be an enormous disincentive to people voting by absentee ballot, but that is just what it's intended to do. A lot of other restrictions as well. Secretary of State can no longer proactively distribute absentee ballot applications. Drop boxes for absentee ballots were very popular last year. These bills would basically let every county bar their use. And if they're still permitted to be used, they had to be closed starting at 5 o'clock the day before the election, when the heaviest use of the drop boxes occurs. The bills make a lot of other changes as well to the county boards of canvassers, to election precincts. I mean, for example, nonpartisan groups will no longer be able to have challengers. So the League of Women Voters, the NAACP, the ACLU, all those groups can't have challengers in the polling place. And these bills also empower the partisan challengers to have even more grounds to challenge people. And you can bet there will be challenges based on photo ID, et cetera, all designed to gum up the works inside the polling places, make the lines longer, and discourage people from voting. So you can see across the board, and this is just the tip of the iceberg, I want to keep this brief, that across the board, what we're seeing here is every possible way that the Republicans can gum up the works, suppress the vote, discourage people from voting. They're attempting to do this. And like I said, we're seeing bills like this elsewhere in the country, and they've already been adopted in a number of states. So let me come back to where this is going. Like I said, the governor's going to veto these bills if they pass. But then I think the Republicans are going to try this petition drive. They've already announced that that's what they're going to do, to bypass the governor's veto. And that's where we need all of you to start to educate people on the ground about the dangers of signing a petition like this. People need to read these petitions. It's very common for folks. Oh, this is just going to put it on the ballot. There's no harm in signing it. And many people sign on that basis and they don't read it. They don't understand that this could take away their voting rights. So we've really got to encourage people to read a petition that's put in front of them. And if it talks about voting rights, they should not sign it. It's really, really important. If they can't get enough signatures, none of this happens. We will challenge the signatures when they file them. But if they have a huge number of signatures, that challenge is going to be much more difficult. So this is really a game of attrition, a game of inches in many ways, that every signature that you all can discourage from going on that petition will help us stop this. One of the things I also want to mention that I think they may end up doing as well is not only a petition drive to bypass the governor, we may well see a petition drive to amend the state constitution, to put many of these things in the state constitution after the voters vote on it during 2020. They may try to roll back all those terrific voting rights that we adopted back in 2018. So we've got to be on the alert. We've got to start educating folks now, whatever way you can, at your union hall, in your church, social groups, every way, so folks understand they should not sign these. There will be decline to sign efforts out on the street that many folks will undertake as well, trying to find these petition gatherers and literally stand next to them and discourage people from signing. But we can start now with the education about how precious their voting rights are. And all this is designed to do is take away your freedom to vote. That's the theme we're going to be using, protecting the freedom to vote, because in the end, that's what this is all about. So I think I'm close to my time here, Jim, and I'll be glad to take questions for as long as you want.
Great. Thank you so much, Mark, for that succinct thing. Colin, I see your hand up. Would you please put your question in the chat? That's the best way to do this technically. So thanks. Do we have some questions in chat yet?
No questions yet, but Greta did remind us that she is going to be doing some memes about this soon.
Great, great. Mark, I've got a question. I'll take the chair's prerogative here. What would prevent us from starting our own petitions that would counteract that? So you have competing petitions on it.
That's something we're considering, Jim. But you got to weigh the risks of that too. What happens if that drive loses? What does that mean? What are the contents of that petition? So that's something we are looking at. But the best, and it's expensive too, right? Among other things, to try to pass our own petition. The best thing we can do is block theirs. And so that's why, again, I think what all of you are doing are so important. But we are looking at every possible tool to stop this. We'll probably end up in court as well. But there's no magic bullet here, no silver bullet. We've got to do everything we can and use every tool we've got to try to prevent this petition drive from becoming law.
Great. Okay. Mark, you should see a chat in there. That's a question from Colin Baldwin.
Let me pull up the chat here.
Barry sent one. He sent questions to Mark Brewer's chat. And Jane Lee says, is the threat to the final certification process still in the bills?
There are a number of threats to the certification process in the bills. In 10 of the largest counties in the state, doesn't include yours, they would expand the board of county canvassers and require supermajorities to certify elections. And so that will enable what we nearly saw in Wayne County last fall, where Republicans, frankly, can simply say no to certifying. And 8 of those 10 counties are Democratic counties. So they're currently targeting that process so that they can pull off what they couldn't pull off in 2020, but came very dangerously close to doing. That's part of the bills.
Okay, and is there a question from Barry Hahn or from?
I see a question from Mary Roebling. If they get enough signatures, will it go to the courts? We will certainly go to court, Mary and everybody. But I can't promise you that everything it's in these bills or could be in the petition will violate the Michigan Constitution or the federal Constitution. We'll try every argument we can, but again, that's our last resort, is going to court. We want to stop the petition drive from the get-go. We want to challenge the signatures if they're filed, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, and only go to court as a last resort. One of the problems with going to court is that that would only be done after the voters passed it.
Get 1 million signatures.
And so at that point, you're asking a group of judges
in a state.
to declare unconstitutional something the voters have already signed off on. And that's always tough. It's always tough if the voters have passed something. So we don't even want to get there.
Great. Colin, did you get your question answered?
I'm trying to follow the chat here. I think I've answered everything so far.
Yeah, I think you have 2, Mark.
How many signatures would the Republicans need to get this into the legislature?
They only need 340,000 valid signatures. I know that may sound like a lot, but it's really a very small minority. My guess is they'll try to collect about 500,000 in order to make sure that, you know, that there's going to be invalid signatures, people not registered, et cetera. And they have proven very good at doing this. The Unlock Michigan group did it in 90 days. They were able to collect over 500,000 signatures. And that was entirely by volunteers. If they do this, there will be big money behind it. Ron Weiser, the multi-millionaire chair of the Republican Party, has promised to provide all the money necessary to do this. And there'll be national money as well. So again, I think because the number is relatively small and they're pretty well organized, we've got to focus on stopping every signature we can at every level throughout the state.
I don't see how you can stop.
Okay. Mark, anything else you want to tell us about this? How do we find out about decline to sign? Do you know about any of that, or is that more party apparatus and not really you?
Right. So we've already formed a ballot question committee in anticipation of this, but obviously there's been nothing to do yet because there's no petition. When they file their petition with the state, they have to file it and disclose that they're doing this. That will activate all of that mechanism, Jim, and there'll be plenty of publicity about opportunities to participate in decline to sign on the street and other kinds of things like that. But right now, again, we're in the education mode, getting ready to go at a moment's notice when this petition surfaces.
And Mark, one of the questions in the chat is from Greta, and wants to know if there's a resource where all of this information is located. It'd be good if we could write letters to the editors, but we need to have all of our facts straight. You may know that we do have a great letters to the editor team here and with the Benzie Dems led by Jane Wilden and others. So, you know, you've got people who are ready and willing to do it. We just need some information.
Right. I have not checked it lately, but I believe the ACLU of Michigan has good information about this on its website. That's the one I recall best. I don't know if I know the League of Women Voters has been very active on this, but I don't know if there's information on their website either about this. So those would be 2 good sources of information. And there's been a number of good press articles that pretty thoroughly describe what's in these bills.
Great, thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Jim,
Yes.
I typed 2 questions, but I don't know, apparently they didn't go through. I just wanted to ask about the For the People Act and the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act, because at the Jocelyn Benson event this past Thursday that I watched the entirety, they made it sound like those are going to save us. Those 2 acts are going to make all this other BS with petitions irrelevant. Maybe I read that wrong. I just wonder what Mark thought about that.
Sure, Barry. You know, there have been a number of proposed federal laws. There's now a revised John Lewis Act. It's possible that federal law could override some of what these bills may do. But first, the federal laws have got to get passed. And I think, I got to tell you, I think that's a big, big hurdle. And we still don't know the content of the petition drive. So I guess my advice, my warning is that we should not count on the feds to save us.
Okay.
And Mark, Mike Ross asks if there are avenues for the Michigan Democratic Party to overturn this ridiculous petition law that allows such egregious denial of the democratic process.
This petition option where the legislature can adopt it without a gubernatorial veto is in the Michigan Constitution. It's been there over 100 years. It would take a constitutional amendment to remove it. There is talk about doing that, but I've seen no concrete plan or effort in that regard. But we're going to continue to see, particularly Republicans and right-wing groups, use this loophole until we get this out of the Constitution.
Great, thank you. Do we have some other questions? Also, too, people looking at the chat might notice that Kira provided some additional information for the topic she talked about on the vacancies. And does anybody have any other questions for Mark?
Mark, do you feel that the decline to sign wordage is a little soft? People won't understand that it's not very scary. Don't we need to push harder that they're going to try to steal our rights?
Yeah, I think that's one way that you could certainly frame it, Barry. We have found that voter suppression is too wonky, right, in terms of what voters understand. That's why I use the words freedom to vote.
Right.
People really react well to that.
Yeah.
You gotta, as we all know, you got to have something that's very short and pithy.
Right.
So stealing our right to vote, Barry, that's a good phrase. Again, freedom to vote. I think those are the kinds of phrases we need to use to describe what's going on here, because people are not, their eyes are going to glaze over on the details.
Exactly. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Okay, Mark, thank you so much. I think we want to call it here and get going with Peter. Mark Brewer, a big round of applause. And believe me, boys and girls, you're going to be hearing about this from us big time. We're going to be depending on you to help us get this message out. It's really a question of education of your friends and family, and even the Republican across the street who thinks they should be able to vote absentee without a whole bunch of hassle, which is what this is all going to be about. So look for that soon. Keep an eye on, watch this space, as we say, because we'll be very aggressively going out there with the message when it's time. And speaking of time, you want to do the co-host thing over to Peter's computer now? You have to turn the, yeah. Hey, this will take a minute. We're going to reset some dials here.
A minute, yeah.
Great, okay. And now, while Peter gets ready to go from his end now, I'll just say I met Peter Sinclair back in, I think, 2008 or so, in the middle of what some of us call the Michigan coal rush. There were proposals to build 8 new coal plants in Michigan, whose economy and use was not really going up very fast. And it was really quite a scramble to stop them. And we met Peter when all that was going on. Oops, I'm sorry. Got it? Okay, all right. Peter at the time was developing in-person and online presentations explaining global warming and how much of a threat it is. And over the years since then, I've seen him transform himself from a former art school student and longtime EMT worker and nurse into an all-in climate activist and well-known expert presenter, not only on climate change, but on the economic and climate advantages of developing large-scale renewable energy projects. Peter still produces online videos for the Yale 360 Climate Project and works with local communities like ours to better understand climate change. Perhaps his most crucial work right now, though, is helping local officials and residents understand that renewable energy development within their own communities has very many upsides and very few downsides. He's helped shepherd a few large wind farm projects through zoning and development in mid-Michigan, and often works directly with utility companies on this. So he really works both sides of the street brilliantly. It's a wonderful thing. My favorite, I have to say, my favorite old online show with him was his original project, which was called Climate Denial Crock of the Week, which he did a fine job of taking down crazy claims by climate deniers and also the alleged dangers of renewable energy. They are done with wonderful humorous tone and a great deal of facts, and they really demonstrate the power of facts and science in the face of myth and hostile attacks. So please, would you please welcome Peter Sinclair. Let's see if we can do this. Let's see.
Okay, now, can everybody hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay, excellent, very good. Okay, so thanks so much, Jim, thanks for inviting me. And, you know, some of you might have seen me present before. Some parts of this presentation may be familiar to you. Other parts of it are much more recent and up to date. So I try to keep mixing it up and keeping it as fresh as possible. For those of you that don't know me, I've been a videographer specializing in change and renewable energy for many years. And are we going to admit that person? Okay. Yeah, and so as Jim said, I started doing videos about 15 years ago on the climate issue, and I found out quickly that among my biggest viewers was the science community. And what I'm most proud of is that over the last few years, science folks have been, oh no. Let's see, I'm trying to advance my slide. It won't go. Okay, this is live Zoom, folks. Live Zoom. Yes, just hold on for just a second. Wait a minute, there we go. Okay, yes. About 10 years ago, scientists started inviting me out into the field to places where they're actually doing some of the critical observations that relate to climate change. 2012 was my first trip to the Northern Cascades. And I'm sorry you folks here nearby can't see this. Maybe we can fix that somehow. But in 2013, I got a call from Dr. Jason Box, who's with the Geological Survey of Denmark and Greenland. And he invited me to help him crowdfund an expedition up to the Greenland ice sheet. And so we actually, you're looking at a video from a place called Saddle in the deep interior of a Greenland ice sheet, which is, yeah, and I don't know how to fix that from my end. I did. Don't, nobody's seeing it? Okay, well, darn it. Okay, we're almost there, folks. Share screen. Share.
There you go. Yeah.
Okay, are we seeing it now?
Yeah, we're seeing it up here.
And everybody can hear me. Okay, so there we go. Yeah, so that's the Northern Cascades in 2012. And I crowdfunded that trip. And based on that, I got a call from Dr. Jason Box. at the Geological Survey of Denmark and Greenland. And that following year, we went to this place, and the Greenland ice sheet. I'm told we were the first people to go to this particular location by helicopter. And then in the years that followed, I continued to go. This is a satellite image from 2014 from NASA. And then, of course, 2020, I was set to go, had my plane tickets, and of course, COVID happened. But interestingly enough, climate change impacts came to me. I live in Midland.
There it goes.
This is the Edenville Dam.
There it goes.
That's about 9 miles up the road from me. After a very heavy rain, that dam collapsed.
What are you doing, Joe?
Causing
There we go. There's the rush.
And I read about it. It was a calamity for communities downstream, and including Midland. And it so happened that just a few months before, I had been interviewing Carrie Emanuel of MIT, who is one of the most quoted atmospheric experts in the world, I would say, and somebody I've interviewed a number of times. And we were talking about the increased impact of extreme storms, in that as climate change increases little by little by little, these extreme storms are coming along that our infrastructure was not designed to withstand. And so that's the topic of this video. So I'm going to jump right in here and let Dr. Emanuel explain. Hopefully you will hear him.
Where climate change gets you most is when you take, say, a 150-year event and it suddenly becomes a 50-year event. And that's sort of what's happening in many places.
The atmosphere now in general has about 7% more moisture in it than it did back in, say, the 70s. There's very clear evidence that all across the United States, especially in the eastern half of the country, we've seen a big uptick. I mean, I'm talking 30, 40, 50% increase in the frequency of heavy precipitation events. This is very directly connected to climate change. It's totally expected. And it's certainly playing out in real time right before our very eyes.
So I grew up in a neighborhood called Meyerland in Houston. And when I was there, Meyerland never flooded. Now it floods all the time. And I went on Zillow and I was looking at houses and I found this beautiful house. It's 5,000 square feet. It's located in a nice neighborhood, good schools. And it's selling for $86 a square foot. It has a pool. I mean, it's really a beautiful house. And if you say, wow, why is it so cheap? It's because it's flooded twice. And so no one wants to buy this. No one wants to buy a house that's going to flood.
And the example I have in mind is Hurricane Harvey of 2017. And 3 independent groups who did not know about each other working on this, one of which was me, estimated that the risk of that level of rainfall in Harris County had more or less tripled between 1970 and 2017 when the event occurred.
And if you'll notice, it says would be a great candidate to lift. So I'll talk about that in a second.
It's going to rain harder on average, so you're going to see more of the type of rainfall events capable of causing extreme flooding.
The 500-year flood event, which are, of course, becoming more and more frequent. We've got climate change as a part of that, but also old infrastructure is as well.
As far back as 1999, the feds warned that the dam needed to increase its capacity to prevent a significant flood from overcoming the structure.
And we have a lot of things that we've built that may be vulnerable to a gradual change, pushing them over a threshold and causing an abrupt issue for us.
Climate change is this constant pressure on our society, affecting millions of little decisions, affecting our lives in millions of ways, each one of them making us a little bit poorer than we would otherwise have to be. You know, if you live in the Gulf Coast, you're gonna have to run your air conditioner more. You're gonna have to pay for flood infrastructure. You're gonna have to pay to raise houses off the ground for new construction. There are just millions of these little costs that are going to be pushed into all of our lives.
You know, the average storm you might encounter every 10 years or so isn't changing very much, but the 100-year event is becoming noticeably, in many places, noticeably more risky.
A heavy rainfall event that would have occurred about once every 100 years on average in a world without human influence is now occurring about once every 20 years on average. And if we continue warming at 2 degrees of global warming from pre-industrial, that same precipitation event will be occurring about once every 5 years on average.
This is not any longer a problem about the future, it's a problem about now.
The entire swath of states from North Dakota to Michigan had their wettest year on record in 2019. And we had just amazing amounts of flooding.
Water vapor is energy. Think of it as energy. When that water vapor condenses into liquid, which happens in a cloud, that latent energy is released into the atmosphere. So that provides even more energy for the storm to work with. So when it does rain, it rains harder.
The danger of flash flooding is actually increasing, and it's not just because of heavier rains. It's also because of heavier real estate development.
It would have been called a 1,000-year flood if the same destructive deluge hadn't crashed through Ellicott City, Maryland just 2 years before.
You had 2 1,000-year floods within 2 years of each other. How did that happen?
The overwhelming factor was intense rainstorms. More water is falling. On top of that, we're intensifying land use, which is clearing the natural vegetation and replacing it with impervious surfaces like concrete, asphalt, through which water does not penetrate.
So you know, I don't know who the owners are, but I know they've lost a lot of money. And so they've lost a lot of wealth. And this is a fundamental problem, this idea of what we call stranded assets. So you might own something. It might be an oil field, it might be a coal mine, it might be a house that floods. And then one day you wake up and it's not worth anything, or it's worth a lot less than you think. And that's a really socially destabilizing problem.
The first degree of warming doesn't cost very much. The next degree of warming costs a little more. The next degree of warming costs more than that one. The next degree of warming costs more than that one. What we face now is very small compared to what we could face if we keep burning all the fossil fuels we can get our hands on.
So this idea that disasters are coming more frequently is correct, and we're going to look at a few of the more recent ones here. But the New York Times pointed out that the amount of money that this is costing taxpayers is, well, in 2017 amounted to about $1,000 for every American taxpayer. And the average number of disasters like these, over $1 billion in damage, is double in the last 5 years, the average of the last 4 decades. So we're going to be paying a tax. Climate is exacting a tax from us. We can decide if we want to deal with it and pay for what it takes to mitigate this, or we can continue to pay the climate disaster tax. One comparison that is made is to the housing disaster of 2008, the Great Recession. And we're looking at losses from climate that are going to be greater than that, potentially much greater. It is much less likely that borrowers will be able to make mortgage payments if their homes are literally underwater. And folks like those homeowners in Midland and downstream are looking at greatly reduced resale value for those homes, especially if this flooding continues, which we have every expectation that it will. And Midland's a wealthy community. I worry about the hundreds of other communities, not to mention Detroit, Lansing, Jackson, major cities around Michigan. I spoke to Andy Hoffman at the University of Michigan School of Business about this, and he brought up an interesting angle in that this phenomena is getting the attention of insurance companies who are paying the tab for this. I'll let him explain.
There are also market shifts in play that are very important. The one I watch very closely is insurance. As we start to have wildfires in California, storms in the Southwest, flooding in this, the storms in the Southeast, flooding in the Southeast. Insurance is watching this very, very carefully. The Society of Actuaries did a survey last year, and climate change popped to the top of the list of concerns among underwriters, and that was a surprise and very unusual. It usually was something that the reinsurance industry focused on, and that your direct underwriters said, we can adjust our policies on a 1-year time horizon, no big deal. Well, now they're saying, well, 1 year may not be quick enough. If you want to rebuild your house after these wildfires in California, guess what? You're finding out that the insurance premiums are going up if you can get coverage, and chances are that coverage is much less than it used to be. And even to the point where some companies, AIG, for example, if you want to have fire insurance in these areas where there are more fires, you actually have to buy into their private firefighter company. And that should raise alarm bells in terms of the equity of that. If you're rich, you can do this. If you're not, you got a problem. And that's where people will start to raise their eyebrow and say, okay, something is amiss here. But I look to the insurance sector. They can monetize this in a way that ripples through the economy. They can also change public opinion. I find that more people will be influenced by a report from Munich Re or Swiss Re, or even their underwriter, Liberty Mutual, State Farm, others, that says this is a problem, where they might be dismissive of the IPCC. Well, those are scientists. Somehow they've become seen as biased, which is unfortunate and not true, but we're talking about public opinion here. But then when people hear, oh, wait a minute, insurance companies, they don't have a political dog in this fight, and yet they're just looking at the numbers and saying, the numbers are going up. You're finding that insurance companies are throwing away actuarial data, like from 10 years and before. It's not very useful anymore. Past is no longer prologue. We're in a new normal. And they're hiring climate scientists to figure out how they can price their instruments to provide insurance. That is an important, and you want to talk about not front page news, although it is showing up on the front page of the Wall Street Journal and elsewhere. We are seeing a shift in the market. And if you really want to change a company's behavior, affect their cost of capital. And insurance companies are doing that. And that, to me, that's an important shift, where maybe government isn't going to get their act together and do this. Insurance companies may do it for them.
Yeah, I think that message really kind of resonates, because I give my presentation in a lot of small towns, conservative areas. And once people understand that climate change is not about the birds and the bees or somebody in the Arctic or something like that, it's about your mortgage, your insurance, your sewage, things that people can really relate to. And now that they're actually seeing it happen, it makes an impression. So here's something you can do on your own. Dr. Emanuel pointed me to this website, floodfactor.com, where this is put together with the cooperation of 70 or 80 of climate scientists of Dr. Emanuel's caliber, who are hired by the insurance industry to look at potential flooding impacts in the United States going forward 30 years. So if you go to this site, floodfactor.com, you can type your address into that field, and it will tell you if the flood risk for your location is going to increase in the next 30 years, and like the lifetime of a mortgage, say. So, and I'll give that to you again at the end of the presentation, but it's illuminating. Next, I'm going to take a look at sort of a mirror image of the flooding issue and some interesting connections that were spotlighted just a few months ago. In June, a lot of you may remember we had an extraordinary heat event in the Pacific Northwest, 121 degrees in British Columbia, unheard of heat. Hundreds, if not thousands of people, additional deaths created by the heat. And as you'll see in this presentation, that event was related to a stuck or slow jet stream pattern that was at the same time creating havoc and extreme events here in the eastern part of the country, part of the same system. So I'll let the scientists explain.
These are numbers that are almost unbelievable even for meteorologists. Lytton, Canada, 121 degrees. That's higher than it's ever been in Europe or even South America. In Canada.
We can certainly say that heat waves are increasing due to climate change.
This heat dome is a once in a 1,000-year event. What does that mean? That means if you lived right here, let's say, for 1,000 years, you would only experience a heat dome like this maybe one time, and I'm being conservative on that estimate.
Where there's no doubt at all is that we are seeing a large increase in the frequency of these extreme and unprecedented heat waves, and that is linked to climate change.
The global warming signal includes strong warming in the Arctics, but also a very strong warming over the land areas in summer.
There was a time 30 years ago, 40 years ago, where it was uncommon in Denver to get 100-degree days every single year, and that is much more common now.
Especially in the summertime, there's been a reduction in the jet stream winds in much of middle latitudes, and that's been going hand in hand with more extreme heat waves.
Now, climate change has increased the temperatures 3 to 4 degrees in the Pacific Northwest over the past century. And by the end of this century, the forecast is if we keep burning fossil fuels, that will be up to 7 to 10 degrees.
In summer, there may be an increasing propensity to see this increase in sort of stuck weather patterns that persist in place and amplify for longer than usual periods of times when the jet stream gets into a certain configuration pattern.
So this is what's causing all this. We have a big blocking pattern or traffic jam in the atmosphere. You can see this very wavy jet stream. So instead of storm systems moving quickly from west to east, they get stuck in these waves right here. And this right here is called an omega block. It's a classic meteorological block, and it's some of the most intense types of blocks.
The other side of the coin is if you get a rainy pattern that sticks around for a week or two, rather than just passing through for a wet day, that too can lead to some major societal impacts.
Because everything is, again, stuck in a traffic jam, this stationary front is stuck across the nation's middle. Some places have seen a foot of rain over the past couple of days, and we're likely to see a lot more over the next couple of days as waves of low pressure ride right along that front will cause magnified flooding over the next several days in the nation's middle.
So a weather pattern that was harmless in the past is now leading to very extreme conditions.
There is no meteorologist who would have said, yeah, it can get to 121 in Canada, but we need to switch our thinking because we live in a climate-changed world, and that means the things that seemed impossible are now not just possible, they are probable.
So this summer, I'm in pretty daily contact with dozens, if not hundreds, of scientists through some mailing lists that I'm on and just by phone and other means. And there's a real sense of concern and even some shock among scientists at the extremes that we've seen this summer in places like the Pacific Northwest, but also Europe and elsewhere. And what we're seeing is that the climate models are pretty much spot on in terms of the average global temperature rise that we're seeing. But what they have not captured is the intensity of these extreme events that come and are amplified simply because there's so much more energy in the atmosphere and so much more moisture. So we saw a mirror image of the Pacific Northwest heat event a few months ago in Texas. You may remember that there was a deep freeze that descended way even below into Mexico and brought Arctic air down into the southern part of Texas, froze that whole state to a degree that does happen, but this particular one was beyond living memory. And you may have heard, if you were watching Fox News at the time, that all the lights went out in Texas because the wind turbines froze. Well, I have the advantage of being able to talk to experts at the University of Texas and Rice University, and as well, I was following minute by minute the excellent reporting from Texas television stations like KHOU in Houston and WFAA in Dallas. And I had some friends, well-placed friends on the ground there. In fact, I was talking, we were watching that system evolve on Valentine's Day in February, and I called a friend of mine who was a retired utility executive in Austin, and he expressed he was looking at it happen in real time, and he saw power plants shutting down, and he was worried. He thought we might be seeing this whole Texas grid collapse right now. But I put together this sort of a mishmash of media reports and science interviews that talks about what actually happened in Texas. And I think it's a good segue to the next part of the presentation.
4 minutes and 37 seconds. ERCOT revealing tonight that's how close Texas was from a total collapse of its power grid.
What we saw in Texas, was a colder, deeper, wider amount of weather that we've really, ever seen. We've had cold weather and we've had events that have led to failures before.
We had really bad deep freezes in Texas in 1983, 1989, 2011, and 2021. And each one strained the grid and led to blackouts of one sort or another. But it feels like a replay of 2011 in terms of power plants tripping offline, the natural gas system freezing up, the gas freeze-offs causing more power plants to go offline, and then you have like a water crisis and this kind of thing.
As several power plants around the state failed, Central Texans faced ongoing electric blackouts as ERCOT cut off power across the region, neighborhood by neighborhood.
The feds had warned Texas of poor winterizing plans a decade ago after another big freeze crippled the state. But recommendations in this report, FERC's new chairman says, were largely ignored.
But this one was colder and wider and longer, lasted longer than previous events.
All 254 Texan counties have imposed a winter storm warning. That's never happened before.
As the cold Arctic mass came in, is we saw an extreme increase in the demand for heating in Texas, as everyone was wanting to stay warm. About 60% of homes in Texas use electricity, 40% use for natural gas. And we just saw like an extremely high amount of heating. Now we meet peak demands like this in the summer all the time. The difference between this event and that event is there was competition in the natural gas system. So while power plants were wanting to consume natural gas to make that electricity, homes were also wanting to consume natural gas for heating. And at the same time, our supply out of West Texas, we had some wells freeze off, some gathering lines freeze, and we weren't able to put more gas into the system, and we ended up short on the natural gas system. So some power plants couldn't get gas. Some other power plants also had freezing issues with cooling water or sensors or all kinds of things. When it all came down to it, we lost about 40% of our thermal fleet during the time when we were demanding the most amount from both of these systems.
Transmission connections between Texas and the rest of the United States
are really pretty limited. So it's difficult for other places in the United States to come to their aid by shipping power.
Every source of power that the state of Texas has been compromised.
The entire natural gas system from the wellhead to the power plant really just broke down.
Access to coal generated power, access to gas generated power also have been compromised, whether it be with regard to systems freezing up or equipment failures. It's just frozen right now. It's frozen in the pipeline. It's frozen at the rig. It's frozen in the transmission line.
So,
so they are incapable, the natural gas providers are incapable of being able to come up with a gas that feeds into the generators that generate the power that will send power to people's residences there in the Dallas area, as well as our nuclear power facility.
One of the lead reasons in the Houston area in particular that caused power outages is the South Texas nuclear project was shut down because of an operational difficulty.
Comanche Peak, which is a nuclear reactor, was within just minutes of going offline. And if that had happened, we really could have had a blackout.
By far the biggest piece, the piece that overwhelmed every other piece of the story is the way that the gas systems and the gas electricity wasn't there when we needed it.
Actually, it's more their natural gas plants that have been affected by the cold weather than it is their wind.
And wind turbines had their trouble with ice on blades, but wind wasn't the biggest problem for the grid. The biggest problem for the grid was the frozen thermal plants, the plants that use coal or natural gas or nuclear that really didn't show up to perform.
You'll hear the people who talked about the freezing of the wind turbines. It was a very small percentage of the power generation that was lost in Texas from renewables. The vast majority was from baseload generation.
During the daytime, solar was the one thing that far outperformed and gave us way more power than we expected.
It's a complex set of factors, but what we know right now is that the wind power plants are mostly meeting their expected performance levels. But what is not happening in Texas is that many of the thermal power plants, the plants that boil water to make electricity, like natural gas-fired power plants, coal-fired power plants, and at least one nuclear unit, are not producing energy. They're suffering outages, and that dwarfs the amount of wind resource that's not performing right now. So it really is a traditional power plant problem, not a clean energy problem.
I and many others have been telling them for years, you should be starting to think about extreme weather events that we know are getting worse, demonstrably, regardless of your viewpoint on climate change and cause. Texas is in the gun sights for an awful lot of extreme weather, and extreme weather is getting worse and worse. We designed this entire grid for Ozzie and Harriet weather. We are already facing Mad Max, and it's getting worse.
We designed the grid for Ozzie and Harriet weather, and now we're looking at Mad Max. I think that's very well put. So I'm gonna shift gears there. I'll just mention, you noticed Governor Abbott of Texas talking to Texas journalists who are on the ground and knew the score. And he said, yeah, the gas froze up, the coal froze up, the nuclear froze up. Literally hours after that, he went on Fox News and blamed the whole fiasco on the Green New Deal. And it's just astonishing. So, I mean, draw your own conclusion as to what that's all about. But so anyway, as I mentioned last year, I had plane tickets ready to go to the Arctic. That didn't happen, but I spent the summer watching and recording the construction of actually what is now Michigan's largest wind project in Isabella County, which is not too far away from me. And what's really significant about this is that about 10 or 12 years ago, we saw a large build out of wind in Gratiot County, which is dead center in central Michigan, about 15 miles as the crow flies from me. And those turbines have been in operation successfully for a decade. And what we're seeing now is communities who live immediately to the north, south, east, and west of those turbines in Gratiot County have, over the last 3 or 4 years started opting in with their own wind projects because they recognize just from their own observations and from daily interactions with their neighbors that the negative nonsense that they may have seen on Facebook or elsewhere is just that, and that the actual advantages of having wind turbines bolstering your economy in these hard-hit rural areas, these are considerable. And so this continues, and so what we're seeing is that is basically a microcosm of what's happening all over the globe. And as the Wall Street Journal has reported, that's because wind and solar now represent the lowest cost option for generating electricity. So smart money is flowing in huge volume into wind and solar electricity, and now batteries. As far as the mood of people in Michigan, we have a recent poll from Michigan State University that said Michigan residents support a transition from coal-fired to more solar and wind electricity. 86% of those responding favored wind. 5% of the public strongly opposes the use of more wind, although I think I've been in some rooms where they all showed up. But you know, it's very much looks like the anti-vaxxer demonstrations that you see in both tone and you know, informational quality. It's really, it's stunning. 90% of the public says they support more solar power, 3% strongly oppose, and the same thing applies. As far as the cost, the best measure of the cost of new electricity comes from Lazard, which is an international accounting firm that puts out an annual summary of the global all-in costs of various energy sources. So everything to the right of this graph is more expensive, everything on the left is cheaper, and you can see solar and wind are coming in as your cheapest sources of new electricity. There's no argument about this in the financial community. This is just well known. So wind has come down in price 71% over the last decade, and that wind project that I showed you, Isabella Wind, is right in a very sweet spot there. Oops, let's go back. I want you to see this. There we go. Yeah, Isabella Wind coming in at $43.20 a megawatt hour. So that is very low. That is a third the price of a new coal-fired plant. Probably much less than that of a new nuclear plant. Nobody knows what a new nuclear plant would cost because we haven't been able to build one. But same deal with solar. Solar has actually come down 90%, almost 90% in the last 10 years. And we're starting to see solar really explode in Michigan. That's and the same bad actors have essentially ported the same arguments over from their anti-wind activity to the solar. And if you can believe it, they're saying that solar panels are too noisy. True story, and killing birds, yeah. So yeah, so I want to introduce you to Patty Poppe. If you don't know, she was up until recently the CEO of Consumers Energy. I have a long and storied history with Consumers Energy, so I pay attention. She became kind of a superstar over the last 2 years, got a huge write-up in the Wall Street Journal because of the enormous shift that she is guiding with one of the country's largest utilities towards renewables away from fossil fuels. And she's a person that just maybe a decade ago had a "I love coal" bumper sticker on her car. Yeah. She's completely turned over. So I've got her in here with a number of other utility experts, industry observers, talking about this massive shift that is going on in conservative old line utilities across the heartland of the United States, moving away from coal and into renewable energy.
You know, post-World War II, electric demand was at a huge steep incline. Farms were being electrified, factories were coming online, we were fueling this great economy, and we needed to build plants as fast as humanly possible. And the reliable, affordable fuel that was available widely was coal, and it did its job. But the formula has changed.
The coal fleet in the US is on average about 45 years old. And that's about getting to the end of their lifetime anyways. And when we built a lot of these things in the 60s and 70s, you know, we had to build these massive plants to get the economies of scale to make electricity really cheap as electricity use was growing and growing and growing and growing and growing.
Demand flat at best, and if we do our job, it might even decline. The actual per capita usage can go down as buildings are more efficient, lighting's more efficient, HVAC's more efficient. We all know that. So given that, we have the opportunity of a generation to determine with what will we replace these big central station baseload power plants. We will replace them with modular renewables because it's smarter.
What we've seen in the past, especially 2 or 3 years, is a recognition of the impact of falling prices for wind, solar, and storage across the country.
If you don't have certainty in your demand curve, you don't want to take a big bet and overbuild a big power plant. And actually, without the increasing demand, that's just a cost that we would all bear. If we're going to build a gas plant, it's going to be 1,000 megawatts. That's the minimum, efficient size. And so that's the way we used to have to think about it. We don't have to think about it that way now.
Whenever these utilities go, to the capital markets to look for these things, it's hard to fund a gigawatt scale plant anymore. And we have, cheaper alternatives in smaller pieces.
And so if we can modularly add renewables, and we can modularly add those renewables to match demand more timely. At the right time, we can add the supply we need 2 megawatts at a time.
Wind and solar are the cheapest form of energy available to us and in the electricity system in the US, full stop.
To be honest, 10 years or so ago, when wind was first being developed in the upper Midwest, it was a very disruptive resource for us. We weren't very good at predicting when the wind would blow. The transmission system really wasn't up to par to handle the intermittency of the wind. And quite frankly, it was wreaking havoc with the economics of our baseload coal plants. So we didn't like it much in 2005, 2006 timeframe. Fast forward to today, we've gotten very good at predicting when the wind is going to blow. The transmission system is able to handle the intermittency of all of this wind. It has no emissions, it has no variable costs, it's relatively inexpensive. What's not to like?
Colorado, where I live, where Excel here is able to buy new wind and solar for less than the cost of continuing to run its existing coal plants. Situations like that are showing up even in Midwest, where Northern Indiana Public Service Company made a similar announcement and is procuring wind and solar to a similar end now as part of its new resource plan.
In the past, you would see that natural gas has been extremely competitive in the resource that you would want to select. But when you start competing and you see cost declines on these renewable resources, you now see them being chosen over these long-term natural gas units.
Everybody in the world has consistently for the last 10 years underpredicted the price declines in solar in particular, but also wind. And now we're seeing that happen with lithium-ion storage as well.
In the past, we've tended to think of our baseload resources, our coal resources, as baseload, and every other resource being supplemental to that, regardless of what it was. Well, that's been turned on its head now. I would suggest to you that wind is quickly becoming the new baseload. And to be viable going forward, all other sources of generation must be flexible enough to be supplemental to the wind. Kind of an exciting thing, right? right now. And you get your mind around that, it makes a lot of sense what we start doing with our other assets and other resources and why we're so committed to the wind.
So I'm gonna start to draw to a close here, but there is one question that does come up, which is, okay, smart guy, what happens when the wind stops blowing or the sun goes down? I'm going to show you some more from Patty Poppy, but also Wolfgang Bauer, who's a PhD engineer at Michigan State University, and some other folks discussing this.
The remaining question is, of course, what do you do about energy storage, right? And fortunately in Michigan, this has been solved completely. We have the largest battery that I know of, at least in North America, here in Michigan, and it's called the Ludington Pump Hydro Storage Plant.
Ludington Pump Storage is the great engineering marvel, one of the great engineering marvels of the world. It is the 4th largest battery in the world. It has 6 units. I don't know how familiar you are or if you've ever visited, but you should, because it's gorgeous. It's the most gorgeous power plant in the world. On the banks of Lake Michigan, pumps water up into a 27 billion gallon reservoir, and we have the 6 largest motors in the world. Each unit has a 500,000 horsepower motor. And those 6 largest motors in the world pump the water up. They power the pumps that take the water up into the reservoir. And then when we need the power, those motors rotating in reverse generate electricity. 2,200 megawatts of carbon-free, emission-free, clean, pure Michigan power. Today, we fill the reservoir once a day. But when we have fully deployed those 5 and then 6,000 megawatts of solar, we'll have excess power in the day. California is dealing with this, and they're concerned about what do you do with extra power in the daytime.
In Arizona these days, between the hours of 11 a.m. and 2 p.m., we get negatively priced electricity from California. There's so much solar being produced in California, they can't use it all. They push it to Arizona during those hours and pay our utilities to take it off the grid.
And guess what we're going to do with it? We're going to pump and fill the reservoir at Ludington. And then we're going to use that reservoir to serve the peak load. And then at night, our wind farms generating extra electricity will also then refill the pond, and we're going to get to refill that pond twice a day because of the upgrade we've done on those motors. That is exciting. That doubles the capacity of that battery for the service of people of Michigan and the inclusion then in our clean energy plan.
So yeah, so I'm gonna skip ahead just a minute here because I think we can. I'm gonna show you a cute story because I think it's relevant geographically here. You may remember about a year ago, Michael Moore produced this dumpster fire of a movie called Planet of the Humans, which was just a horrible exposition of just about every nonsense meme about renewable energy imaginable. I watched it and was just, just awestruck by the sheer stupidity and I think everybody that knows anything that I talk to agree, engineers, scientists, the reviews from engineers and scientists were pretty brutal, and there were a number of really scathing debunkings. And I thought, well, no need for me to weigh in on this because darn near everybody else and his brother has. And but then I read a piece that Michael Moore wrote where he made some misstatements about something that I really do know something about that's very close to me, which was the failed construction of the nuclear plant in Midland, which I know a great deal about. And so I thought, okay, at that point, I realized I'm going to have to write something. I wrote a blog post called Michael and Me because I knew Michael. Michael was a regular house guest at my parents' home back in the late 70s when this plant was under construction. There were all kinds of problems with it. Michael frankly saw it as an opportunity to draw attention to himself and his publication. And my mother, who was leading some of the people who were asking questions about the nuclear plant, was desperate for any kind of media. And so we saw a lot of Michael Moore. So I wrote this piece kind of setting the story straight. Basically, Michael said that, you know, he made the nuclear plant go away. And so I posted the piece that 60 Minutes actually did about that whole thing, which they came to our house, they interviewed my parents, they got the story mostly right, and showed that Michael Moore was basically talking out of school. But interestingly enough, this went slightly viral. And about a day or two, maybe 3 or 4 days later, I got a little message on Facebook from this woman, Joanne DeRocho, who is now currently executive director of the Center for Justice and Democracy at New York Law School. But years ago, she worked for Michael Moore, it turns out, as a fact checker and an attorney. And in fact, in his book, Downsize This, in the acknowledgments, Mr. Moore refers to her as one of the most honest people he knows. And she messaged me on Facebook, and then she wrote a post where she addressed the concerns about the accuracy of that movie. And just to run through it, you know, she was fact checking for several of his films, Fahrenheit 9/11, Sicko, his TV show, several book projects. And at that time, while she was in charge, they complied with rigorous checks on accuracy. They made fact check Bibles for his films and put them on the web, dealt with studio lawyers constantly to make sure everything was airtight. The director, she says, the director of this new film, that's Jeff Gibbs, who was part of the team then, she said, was someone we never let near the fact-checking process. In my experience, he seemed attracted to conspiracy theories and information that was not factual, and I believed his influence on Michael could be damaging to his films. I cannot speak to what happened to Michael's films after I stopped helping to ensure their accuracy, but it is excruciating to see what has happened now, although it is not surprising. People disturbed by the inaccuracies in this film are not haters. They, like I, are pained by them. The factual errors should never have happened. So just a little bit, I think, of some with some local flavor in terms of where we are with renewable energy and some of the strange bedfellows that makes. Just a little bit of a review here. Floodfactor.com is the website where you can plug in your address and find out about your flood risk. Best place to go to start for climate information is always Climate.nasa.gov, where you can, what's that? NOAA. Climate.NOAA.gov. There you go. Win101.info is a site I made with all kinds of social media resources that I hope you'll use and share in regard to the facts on wind energy. Sun101.org is similarly a resource for social media shareables on solar energy. So if for those of you that have been hanging in thus far, my apologies, this has gone so long, but I'm happy to stick around and answer questions if anybody has them. Sure.
We have a question in the room. I've never thought of hydroelectric dams as batteries, kind of the way they're funding money. Right. Why is it throughout the UP that was rich in hydroelectric dams, they decommissioned many of those that are actually pretty efficient batteries. And why
Well,
are we continuing to build hydroelectric dams?
Well, I haven't studied all the dams in the UP. The question is, the Ludington Pump Storage Facility is obviously kind of a hydroelectric facility of sorts, and it works good as a battery. So why have we decommissioned some dams, for instance, in the UP and elsewhere? Well, the dam, to be I guess the main thing is that the amount of electricity produced by an individual dam, the kind that we typically see in Michigan, that were built largely in the 20s, 30s, around there. You know, they're getting pretty old. And a new wind turbine, one single new wind turbine produces probably, I would say, 5 times as much energy as one of those dams, and probably more cheaper, given that so many of them have fallen into disrepair to the extent that they hardly produce anymore, and it costs a certain amount of money to bring it back up to speed. So and also there are ecological concerns about we dammed up so many rivers without thinking too much about the impacts on fish and other kinds of wildlife in the area. So across the country, you're seeing a lot of dams be decommissioned, in large part because they're no longer really efficient, and we are placing a new value on the ecological services that a free-flowing river provides us. I think that would be the answer.
We have a question from Marcia Curran, who said, is there a report available that would advise local building code designers how to make the codes better for local construction given climate change? Need to get these voices on our construction approval committees. Please comment, Peter and others.
Wow, that's a great question, and I can't say that there's something that jumps right to my mind. There are a number of engineering groups that are thinking about climate change, but as far as stuff that's trickled down to the local contractor level, I'm not really aware of it.
So Florida, especially after Hurricane Andrew, they instituted some new building codes, hurricane shutters, certain types of bolts, roof tie downs. Are you seeing anything though similar to that happening in places that were flooded or suffering from severe climate extremes?
Well, you're seeing, I can speak to a little bit to Midland, for instance. We've had a series of floods. The city council has been looking at the situation, and what it boils down to is that they spent a lot of money on pumping stations for stormwater, which work, which perform well. But a big part of the problem is that houses that were built before, I think 1986, based on the building codes, simply don't have enough capacity to move the water that sheds off of their roof away from the houses. Houses are built with like tiling systems around them, and they, at least in my area, they tie down into the storm sewer through a little tile system. Yeah, and those older houses systems are not adequate to keep up with the kind of large precipitation events that we're seeing now. So the city of Midland is looking at a large expenditure to essentially enforce and finance the reconstruction or rebuilding of repair of those tiling systems for houses that are in areas that have been critically impacted. And of course, they're running into people that are mad at them for wanting to do this. It's tremendously expensive, but if they don't do it, then we have a solid middle-class community of housing that is looking at increasing damage and uninsurability and decrepitude and loss of tax base and just a kind of a death spiral. So I think it's being done locally, but I'm just not aware of any enforcement on a national scale.
And Colin asked a question if you knew anything about the black blade on wind turbines being effective in helping to save some of the bird deaths and damage.
Well, yeah, you can. Somebody did a study in Europe where they painted one half of one blade on wind turbines a different color, and they found that it reduced the number of bird strikes by 80%, which was astounding. I don't think anybody knows why. I mean, more study needed, but it's an example of how much work and attention is going into that. And frankly, you know, all due respect to the former president, wind turbines are not nearly the bird killers that some people would like you to believe.
About the thing about the consumer scale.
So consumers
Yeah.
come to these new meetings who would gridlock with their solar cap.
Right. So here's the thing. Our utilities across the country are in transition. 10 years ago, 15 years ago, it would be very hard to find a utility that was enthusiastic about renewable energy. Somewhere along the line, well, a number of states put in, like Michigan did, renewable energy portfolio standards, a required amount of renewable energy. And that forced, kind of dragged the utilities kicking and screaming into building some wind and a little bit of solar. And what happened is, much to their surprise, these, particularly the wind, performed amazingly well, came in at much lower prices than anyone expected, and was a positive benefit to their grid and their system. So they had kind of a come to Jesus moment about wind and now solar, and they are now building them at scale. The barrier that they still have is they still believe that they want to own the means of electricity production, which makes sense because that's how they get remunerated. But it is what we're looking at right now is they are still against, say, you and I as homeowners or small business owners being able to put solar on our roof and get paid back for any excess electricity that we generate at anything near a fair market rate. So that's holding things back in Michigan and a few other states. But what I will predict is that just as they came around on utility scale solar and wind, they're going to come around on local solar as well, simply because the technology is irresistibly pushing them in that direction. And as the battery storage, like Tesla's Powerwall, gets cheaper and cheaper and cheaper, they're going to stand to risk having their more well-to-do customers and commercial customers simply drop off the system and self-generate, leaving greater and greater portions of the expense on lower income and middle income homeowners, which is something that I don't think they want, and I don't think the legislature would be kind to for very long. And also, what they will see is that we're going to be electrifying everything as part of the move to combat climate change. Everything, our automobiles, everything in our homes are going to be electrified. And so the utilities that grasp that and understand that facilitating that electrification and thinking of themselves as electricity service providers and enablers rather than just generators, they're going to make a whole heck of a lot more money. And so I look for, you know, those kind of barriers to drop in coming years, sooner maybe than people think.
Do we have time for one? Also, a request, Peter, could you please stop sharing your screen so people can actually see you while you're talking?
Yeah, I can do that.
And in
Sure.
the meantime, can you weigh in on the federal carbon tax and current bills in Congress? There are several.
Yeah, I am not sure I have much hope for a carbon tax to get passed. We recently had some Greenpeace activists conducted a sting interview with a utility, or not utility, but Exxon executives who Exxon famously came out in support of a carbon tax some years ago. And this executive in an informal conversation just simply admitted that a carbon tax was something Exxon felt was cost-free for them to support because they never expected it would ever get passed, simply because anything that's called a tax is not going to pass, at least in the current Congress that we have. So, you know, I'd love to see it. It would be great. Alternatively, Joe Biden is proposing a national renewable electric standard of something like 80% by 2030, which many experts tell me is actually a preferred mechanism. So maybe we can get that passed. I would say let your representatives know that you want this infrastructure package passed in full. And I think that's the best way forward. Yeah.
We're looking for some messages of hope. And I think a lot of what you talked about in terms of what the utilities are doing is very, very hopeful. I think that the technology seems to be moving forward much more quickly than people are aware of. The news doesn't report on it. Utilities are doing it anyway because it makes a whole lot of sense. What are the things we can do to encourage that, or what are the other tracks you see people like us who are kind of political and care about our communities? What can we do? What should we be doing?
Yeah, overwhelmingly, the number one thing is to talk about it. Talk about climate change at work, at church, around the water cooler, on social media, among your friends, with your leaders, with newspaper editors, with representatives. A lot of representatives have over the years thought that people don't really care about climate change because they don't hear about it enough. That's starting to change. Even Republicans are now trying to find a way out of their bind on climate change. They've painted themselves into a corner. We'll see how they do. But overwhelmingly, as I heartily advise everybody, you know, insulate your house, you know, buy an electric car, you know, do everything you can to lower your own carbon footprint. You'll save money. You'll probably get healthier, eat less meat. Great idea. But those individual actions, you know, if you and I and everybody in this room and our 100,000 closest friends did all that stuff, would make almost no impact or unnoticeable impact on climate change. We have to have system-wide social change, technological change, political change, and it's only going to happen when people really push from the grassroots up and make sure that this is a priority. I think, you know, this is starting to happen. Every poll tells us that this is happening, and more so every year. But if you've ever harbored an idea in your life, an aspiration that you thought, gee, I wish there was something I could do for my society, for my fellow human beings, for my grandchildren, and you're waiting for the right moment, I would suggest now is the right moment. Pick up a pen, pick up your computer, call somebody and get started. Great.
Peter, I have a question. This is Marcia Curran. I put one, I don't know if you responded to this because I had to go away for a minute or two.
Okay.
But I put one in the chat that says, how do we get the oil and gas industry to stop drilling and producing endless amounts of fossil fuels? What I mean is, this must happen sooner than we seem to be even discussing how it can make this change happen. We cannot expect the move to EVs to be an adequate way to make this happen, I'm sorry, I'm losing my place here. Adequate way to make this happen soon enough. I think EVs are great. I have one, but I've had one for 10 years. Doesn't the government have to act to make it happen sooner, through some kind of regulation? And what should that be? I don't hear anybody talking about this. We really need to, and they're not going to do it on their own. We need to somehow, give them, 25 cents on the dollar or whatever we have to do and stop the wildcatters. I mean, I know we need oil. We need it for some things. We need it to make certain plastics safe for medication, medical supplies and things like that. We need it probably for a lot of other things, but we really don't need as much as we use. And I just I don't hear people talking about how to deal with that aspect. And that's a huge aspect of our use.
It's a huge problem. I do think that the writing is on the wall in terms of the technology. You're not going to see any new, for instance, coal plants built in the United States. You're not likely to see too many more gas plants built. It's going to get harder and harder to finance those. And the ones that do get built very likely will end up stranded assets. The difficulty is that you're correct that we are kind of stuck with fossil fuels for the near term and maybe natural gas for the medium term. And we are seeing some pushback from the federal government in things like President Biden canceling the what's that pipeline? The Keystone, thank you.
Keystone
the
3
pipeline, yeah, right. And there are citizens that are taking direct action against a number of other pipeline projects. There was recently a cancellation of a big pipeline that was going to run up and down the East Coast that carry gas. There's a big fight going on in Minnesota with this, I think it's called Line 3 pipeline.
Right.
People are taking direct action on that. It's a complex, sticky problem because, for instance, I've been working with trying to reach out to members of labor unions who are interested in doing things like building wind turbines and solar farms and new battery plants and things like that. But they are also interested in building pipelines. And so you run into a kind of a political logjam there, particularly on the Democratic side, who are trying to keep this sort of uneasy, delicate coalition together. So I would say keep sending the message to your representatives that this is an issue of overriding importance. And if we can get this current infrastructure package in total, with all of the encouragement and incentives for renewable energy, if we can get that passed, history shows us that when we move strongly in the direction of renewable energy, we get much greater results faster than anybody would have imagined. And very, very important as a first step to get this infrastructure bill passed. And then that will send a multi-trillion-dollar signal to markets around the world and investors around the world. And the quickest thing that will bring this to a stop or begin to wind it down is that investors no longer make money available, or as Dr. Hoffman pointed out, insurance companies make it more and more difficult to get insurance for new drilling, new pipelines, new infrastructure, fossil fuel infrastructure. So I would say, you know, the most critical thing that we got to do right now is get that bill passed.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Thank you so much for this great presentation. Let's thank him again.
Thanks, Peter.
And okay, we're gonna go back to regular order here. You're gonna turn your your stuff off there.
All right, there we go.
Remind people they want to keep the chat.
Yes, before you leave, if you want to keep the chat, please go over there and save it. You know how to do that. Down in the right-hand corner, there's 3 dots next to the chat. And you'll have all the information for contact for all the good information you've heard today. We will meet again on the 3rd Saturday of September. Don't know if it's going to be a Zoom from headquarters or a regular Zoom. We'll have to talk about that based on how this went. If you got any comments on this format, what you like it or not, let us know, okay? We want to keep you all happy, and we want to keep you coming back for more. So with that, I think we'll end the meeting. And thank you all very, very much for being here. Thank you for Mark Brewer. Thank you for Peter Sinclair. Thank you for Janet Goldman and Mark Willett Green for helping put this whole shebang together. Thanks for our studio audience here today. And we'll see you all soon. Thank you very, very much. Everybody. Yeah.